Welcome to another edition of Grace Under Pressure, where my guest today is Tony Martignetti. I'll tell you all about Tony in just a moment. Grace Under Pressure, as few viewers of this show know, it's a show that deals with what's so often dismissed as the soft stuff, the caring, the commitment we exert toward one another. And when you do it from a leadership position, as you definitely will discover that Tony Martignetti is, you do it with common cause of bringing people together. Tony Martignetti, welcome to Grace Under Pressure.
Well, thank you so much, John. I'm so thrilled to be here. I am a big fan of your work, and I'm so thrilled to finally be on this show and join you for a great conversation.
Great. The honor is mine, my friend. We have met face-to-face, actually, almost unusually in this kind of world of digital connections, but we know one another face-to-face. Let me tell you about it. You are a trusted advisor, leadership coach, and facilitator. You are a best-selling author and a podcast host, and I'm returning the favor and happily inviting coming on my show. So you've been recognized by Thinkers 360 as a top voice in leadership, and LeadersHum for the same. You are Chief Inspiration Officer for Inspired Purpose Companies. Prior to that, you had a career in finance and worked in life sciences, which is a commentary area of Massachusetts. So I'm sure you did great work. Now you do the Virtual Campfire podcast.
Yes.
And that is the title of your new book, and it's what we're going to talk about today. So, Tony Martignetti, welcome to Grace Under Pressure.
Amazing. Thank you so much.
You know, I really love the title of Campfire Lessons for Leaders. Tell me how the concept of Virtual Campfire came about. It warms my heart. How about that for being cliched?
Yeah. Well, let's keep it going. Cliche, it's okay. I think that the idea of the campfire, virtual campfire, came from this idea that I loved campfires as a child, and I've always enjoyed this idea that campfires are where people come and sit around and share stories, not just stories about like how was your day kind of things, and superficial surface level stuff, but get deep. We usually get really vulnerable and maybe share things that you don't normally share. So I love that intimacy of the fire. And usually the reason why it's so intimate is because you're sitting around while the fire goes, and usually until the fire goes out. So there's plenty of time to explore conversations deeply. So I love that idea, and I wanted to tap into it. And originally, the idea was not a podcast. It was actually to create this in real life. But then COVID happened, and I had to decide what to do with all this. So it became a podcast.
Right. Well, you write a description of the book, and you say, through many conversations, well over 200 guests, you've come to understand that everyone has a story. And I like this, as you said, people have come to make tough choices. And I think that's something we don't talk enough about, Tony. So what's an example of a tough choice that, it doesn't have to be an individual, but what kind of tough choices? Are we talking career? Are we talking about life and death? What kinds of things come to mind, Tony?
Tough choices are, we're talking about some choices are just the very existence to breathe, continue breathing. I've had guests on my show who've had some life and death situations. And then there's other people who've had decisions they've made to change the course they're on because of something they experienced and said, yeah, this isn't serving me. This isn't who I am. And had made decisions to choose a different path. And so those tough choices are challenging. In fact, one thing that comes to mind around this is that sometimes the toughest choice is when you're choosing between two very good things.
I'm glad you mentioned that, because that is sometimes it's not yes or no per se. It's two yeses, if I may.
Exactly.
So explain that, Tony.
The person who comes to mind is this journalist, author. His name is Eric Weiner. Wrote the book Geography of Bliss, and he's in the book as well. But I think when he explained his situation, he was leaving a career as an amazing journalist for NPR, traveling the world and doing amazing. But he made a decision to leap out and write his own books because he realized he wanted to tell a happy story and not always be in the negative spin that oftentimes is what journalism is all about.
Right.
So, yeah, and you can relate to this. You've had a bit of a background in this as well. But the idea that he had a really good, lucrative job, traveled him around the world, but he also felt like there was something missing for him that had him thinking, well, here's a way for me to pivot and do something different.
Great. So now switching, and we're going to get more into that, but you have something called the growth mindset. And I hear that term sometimes tossed around, but what does it mean to actually have it? Or more importantly, what does it mean to live it? So.
Yeah. Well, when I think about the growth mindset, which obviously all the hat tips to the people who really innovated in this space, Carol Dweck and all the other people who have really thought about this in the early days. I mean, for me, when I think about, you shape your world through a mindset that involves embracing challenges and learning from feedback and viewing, the effort as a path to mastery, and when I say mastery, people think like, oh, mastery, does that mean perfection? No, it doesn't. It means like getting better at things and moving forward and knowing that you can sharpen your saw by continually working at your craft. And another part of the growth mindset that I love talking about is this idea that we see every obstacle as an opportunity to grow and develop. So when you have a growth mindset, it's how you approach the world and how you see things as opportunities, not as obstacles that are insurmountable. They may just be stopping points that we say, what is this? And how do I look at it from a different angle?
Tony, I think that's such an important point in our success-obsessed culture, or popular culture, I should say. When we look at people like Tony Martignetti, we go, well, he's a star. He's made it, and we don't know the backstory of Tony Martignetti or anyone else. So few of us ever were born on third base, actually. So most of us had to at least get to first base and around. So I like the concept of the growth mindset carrying us through challenges. Is that your perspective, Tony? So.
Absolutely. I agree. And I think it's so great that you mentioned that because, I always say that nothing is as it seems on the surface. And we do have this obsession with looking at things on the surface, but we have to dig a little deeper and ask questions and stay curious. And I think that's where a lot of my work has come from, is this sense that it's about connection, but deeper connection, and asking the questions that allow us to get to know people on a more intimate level, to know, well, what is the journey you've been on? And how can we get to know each other better so that I understand you better?
Right. Now you have a triad of C's called the 3 C's.
Yes.
And you mentioned 2 of them. Tell us what they are and how they work together.
Yeah. So first of all, I have it as part of what I call the grounded leadership framework, because I think of grounded leadership as the path that I'm on to create more grounded leaders in the world. And I use it as an entryway in this book for people to look at the stories. And so the 3 C's are, they're curiosity, compassion, and connection. And when I think about curiosity, we already dove a lot into curiosity. It's about having an open-minded exploration about the way you look at the world. Compassion, empathy and understanding towards yourself and others. Very important that it's not just other focused, because people always think like, oh, I'm compassionate towards other people. But the question is, how are you compassionate towards yourself? And that's important.
I think that is so important. And that's one of the themes I talk about. I don't think you can be compassionate toward others if you don't give yourself a break. So it's a good point. Yeah. And then that third thing you have is
connection. Yeah. And it's about building strong and meaningful relationships. And we know, one of the things you'll see as a theme throughout my book and throughout a lot of the things that I've seen is that nothing gets done on our own. we need people, we need connections. In fact, that's the only way to get truly to be successful in life is through relationships with others, healthy relationships.
Now there's another C, but it's not part of your triad, but it's called courage, and you use a modifier, and I wanted to explore that. So tell me about emotional courage.
Absolutely. I mean, and this is one that I needed a lot of when I was just getting started in this world of coaching and in leadership development. For me, emotional courage is about facing uncomfortable emotions and situations that allow you to grow and make meaningful change. And I always think about this idea of leaping to learn. You have to leap out there and learn through the process of leaping. And I think that's how the courage comes in. It's about taking the leap and then allowing yourself to experience all the emotions that come with it. And the quote I always think about is from one of our fellow friends, is Peter Bregman. If you're willing to feel everything, you can do anything. I might have butchered it a little bit, but I think that's the essence.
No, I like the way you frame courage from a stance of embracing the feelings that are coming at you, and then recognize them, acknowledge them, and then act accordingly. And so it leads to my next question about discomfort. So I think I know the answer, but I want to hear your answer. So if we are experiencing discomfort, adversity, how do we get through it, Tony?
Yeah. Well, you leap into it. No, I'll just say a bit more about that. It's a catalyst for growth. Discomfort is something we need in order for us to move forward in our relationships. I mean, it helps us to forge new personal and professional identities in our lives. By getting the discomfort, we get to see who we really are. So I think of that stepping out of our comfort zone, which we often say, as a way to explore new opportunities and new identities about who we really are. Because if we stay in our comfort zone, we're never going to really understand ourselves.
Great point. And now we're coming back to Virtual Campfire, the book, and you gave a lovely description of your experience with campfires as a kid and being around them. And you come back to this by what you didn't say, but it's a way of connecting with nature. So what does that mean with you? How do you tie the digital to nature? Because they seem diametrically opposed. So.
Yeah, I know. It's interesting. You wish we could all be out in nature all the time, because truly that would be the best place to make this all happen. But sometimes you got to modify to fit into the digital world, because it's a necessity. But I'll just say, my connection with nature, and the reason why I think nature is such an important part of our existence, is that nature it inspires creative thinking. It provides the right environment for us to be distraction free, or usually distraction free, and it allows our minds to wander and generate new ideas. And I'm always thinking about the idea of being expansive. Expansive thinking is something that people recognize in me as being a quality that they love. And I think nature is a place to be expansive. It widens our view, so we get to focus ultimately, but we need to get expansive first.
Well, it's interesting like that, because whenever I'm in nature, whatever it be, the mountains, the ocean, or whatever, I actually feel pretty small. But if I don't see a horizon, or if I see a horizon, it's always my perception is in a distance. Or if I'm in a forest, I'm surrounded by trees, which I'm small. It kind of puts me in my place, I think. But it does lead to rumination, or at least thinking. Is that what you're saying, Tony? Sorry.
Absolutely. It leads to thinking, but you nailed it right there when you talked about how small you feel. But when you look out into the trees and you start to feel the sense of how much is around you, you don't feel confined by four walls. Like I'm sitting in an office right now, and you don't feel like this is what defines who I am. Instead, there's a wide world out there. I can walk as far as the land will take me. And that's the expansiveness. And it starts to get you thinking about how far the horizon can go. And that's where the expansiveness comes into place.
Right. While we may feel small, I think our imagination expands, as you were
100%.
saying. That's good. Now, you have another take on this, which I really like, and I want you to explore it. How nonlinear thought processes help us. First of all, define what nonlinear thought processes are, and how they work. How can they work for us?
Yeah, I mean, to give like the best definition I have for nonlinear thinking, I kind of see it as a gateway to creative problem solving and innovation. It's not following the tried and true path, but instead, bringing together things from all different places and bringing them together so that you can, create a different outcome. And when I look at like what I've done with the podcast, it's been interesting because I look at some of the guests and the connections I've curated over time. And I use that word curated very intentionally because it's like being a museum curator. You curate a collection of interesting things, and then you figure out how they all have commonality and how they have differences. And because of that, I think of myself as a nonlinear thinker who likes to connect seemingly unrelated ideas that lead to a unique solution by bringing these people together.
That's a good perspective, and I think we need some of that. I mean, while things when we focus on execution, which is often A, B, C, D, not always, but sometimes we need A, B, F.
Exactly.
So, or A, B, C, 5, 6, 7. So which is totally not linear, getting away from that. So, and I think each has its place. And you can frame it as the creative aspect. So now, these are all good things. We talked about the virtual campfire, bringing people together, new mindsets, growth mindset, all of that. But there's something else that may be triggering our growth, and that's called doubt. So talk about self-doubt, Tony.
Well, we could talk about self-doubt all day. And I think it's still something that people often think you get to a certain point and self-doubt goes away, but it still shows up from time to time. So I think it's a very real thing, and we got to be okay with that. We overcome self-doubt by improving our self-awareness. And even when you become self-aware, you still have some awareness that you need to bring as you grow. So I think that's important to be aware of. We become more confident through small successes. So as we seek feedback and focus on our strengths, we can overcome self-doubt. But it all comes from this, having small successes along the way, and that gives us confidence. Seeking feedback, giving us more awareness of what we're putting out, how is it being received, and then focusing on some of the strengths helps us to see that we are doing something that potentially is worthwhile to other people. People are seeing our value out in the world. So there's a lot of parts to it that help us overcome self-doubt, but I do realize that it's something that never fully goes away.
Right. I looked at doubt as actually a positive in the sense that it's a governor on our ego. If it becomes crippling, it prevents us. But I think you said something which is very important, and I like how you wove it in. You spoke about seeking feedback. Now, seeking feedback with a new project or a new endeavor, I think that takes an amount of bravery. Would you not say so, Tony?
100%. I mean, 100%. And I think it comes down to a sense of like trusting in yourself enough to be able to ask other people for their feedback. When I say trust, I mean, it's not just about trusting in whether or not someone's going to be nice to you. It's about trusting in your competency, in your ability to show up and add value. So there's a bit of, not just bravery, but the ability to know, hey, do I trust that I can ask these questions? Do I trust that I can build in, that I can handle the feedback I'm going to receive? There's a lot of that comes along with it.
Okay. Now, there's aligned with this, or perhaps standing in the way, or self-doubt comes into play, is in the topic of clarity. And you talk about clarity in a career path. So
Yeah.
give me some, illuminate that. Is there a story that you've come across that can shed a light on clarity? Because do we ever really know? So.
Yeah. I mean, clarity is it's an, a thing that is elusive for many, and it's, for all, I should say. At some point we have a challenge with finding clarity. And I think there's three things I always look for. To find clarity, we have to understand, what do we value? What are the values that are our true north of where we're headed, right? If we don't know what we value, and those values can change over time, then it's hard for us to know what we need to focus on or where we need to head in our career path. Understanding your strengths is the next part of this, which is to say, if we don't know what we're good at or what we enjoy, putting out in the world in terms of strengths, then it's hard for us to leverage them. And that builds confidence, right? And then the last part is aligned with inspiration, which is, what lights you up? What makes you come alive? I often do an exercise with my clients around, planning your weeks ahead and making sure that you plan for a source of inspiration, a spark of inspiration. If you look at your calendar and you look at it and there's nothing there that has you excited or nothing you look forward to, then it's time to rethink the calendar, because we need to have things in our lives that light us up, that make us want to come alive. So I think it's important.
We just had a comment from someone as well as Annette, who talks about she loves your idea of nonlinear thinking and nature and travel, is something that she practices herself. So as I was listening to your answer, if we're kind of stuck where we are, do you advise your clients to go out in nature or take a trip?
Amen, my friend. No, absolutely. I think that's the best way for us to challenge ourselves. And I think when I look back in my past, and even in my journey into this chapter, every few years I'll pause and I'll take a mini sabbatical, because I want to make sure that I'm continuing to keep my spark alive. My last time I did this was I climbed Kilimanjaro. I took about a month off because I did the mountain, and then I went on safari. And the thing is that I did this because I was questioning, where am I going to next? And there was a lot of fear leading up to that, to say, like, how do I step away from my business for that long? I can't be on my cell phone. I can't be on email unless I have a sat phone, which I didn't. I think it was a big challenge, but also a part of growth for me to take a step away, rethink, reassess, and then come back energized and ready to go.
So being out there, how did you feel 2 weeks into it? Oh.
Very painful. It was, I felt great. I felt great. I was with a bunch of strangers, people I didn't know. So I think in some ways that was great, because for me, I make friends easily. I'm not to say I'm some, weirdo, but like
you're a friendly person. I will pat you on the back for that. Absolutely. You're very approachable and accessible. So.
Thank you. But I think that was what was really cool, is just being out there and just not being distracted by the inner world of email and, the distractions of the day-to-day. And the irony of it all is, the more I get away in these types of mini sabbaticals, the more my business grows, which is weird. It's almost like the tension we create for ourselves holds us in a place where we're stuck.
Yeah. Oh, let's explore that. You say the more you're away, the more your business grows. Is that because you've acquired new thinking that will help your clients, or what is it?
To be honest with you, I don't know. I think it's more about just releasing tension, releasing tension in yourself, and people realize that. I don't think we can hide the tension in our bodies and the tension in our voices. And so as we navigate through our days and our lives, oftentimes we're holding tension that we don't even recognize. In fact, I wrote an article about this in Fast Company about, pay attention to your tension and how it's a sign of something that needs to happen in your life, something needs to change.
That's so important. And, the tension that there's something of creative tension, which is positive, but then there's the distress aspect of it. It erodes us, and it's not good. We can hide it, but it's taking an effect on our physical health and obviously mental too. So we cannot be our best. So kudos to you for taking this break. So, because a lot of people would hesitate doing that, me included. Note to self. So, Tony, we are racing along in this, and I could keep going. But as you know, I like to ask everybody a story about grace. Is there one that you would like to share with us?
There is. I'm just trying to think about which one I really want to dig into. All right. Well, I'm going to give a business story because I think it helps. I was at a company where I was the 15th person hired in locally, but my job was to basically relocate and lay off a number of people in another location in Washington State. And so it was a challenging situation. So here I am, the 15th person hired locally, but we had a whole operation out in Washington State, and I had to keep them going and keep them on board for a period of time during transition, with them fully knowing that they're going to lose their jobs at the end of this. So how do you keep them motivated? How do you keep them engaged? And how do you keep them, doing their jobs outside of the financial incentives, which they had, while also trying to onboard a new team. And we're a public company already. So it was really tricky. But the thing about Grace here is that I was really honest with them. And I said, we know what's happening. We know where this is headed. And I want to do what I can to make sure we all get what we need out of this, including you, the people who are leaving. And so I treated them with the most grace I could, with the respect I could, and even to the point where I helped them find jobs after they left. So it was a situation where I try to be as open and honest with them in this process. I feel like that's a story.
Yeah, that's about. I've known managers who've had to do what you have done, and it never gets easy. It was one colleague told me, and so how you handle it makes a real difference. And so you did handle it with grace, and first of all by being honest, and second of all by helping them to the next step. But I think that honesty is important. It's not what everyone wants to hear, but they need to hear. And that's an aspect of it, being straight up and what can I do to help type. So, Tony, with that, how can people find you?
Well, first of all, I'll just say the best place to find me is my website, which is it's ipurposepartners.com, which I know is weird because it's inspiredpurposepartners.com, but hey, I just didn't want it to be that long. So you can find me there, and there you can find my podcast, my books, and whatever you'd like to find there, as well as LinkedIn. It's a place where you can find me pretty active there. So that's right.
Well, Tony, we will put this in the notes, and so people will find you. It's been a pleasure to connect with you digitally, and hope to cross paths face-to-face one day soon. Thank you, Tony Martignetti. So,
thank you so much, John.
With that, we will go out.
Oh, that's beautiful. The water.